Hello and welcome to Power Culture Coco, home of the Coco. I have ideas. So today we're launching a new series on the Madonna and the Wh-re Complex. You get what I'm saying. Which in the broadest sense is the misogynistic social pattern to perceive and categorize women into two camps. You got the Madonna, who is pure, nurturing, desireless, and chaste. She is the Virgin Mother. And then you have the Wh-re. She is the promiscuous, immoral, manipulative seductress who enjoys her own sexual agency and uses it to manipulate men and corrupt humanity. Mwahahaha. Women can be either, but never both, right? And so an example is when we saw this play out with Keke Palmer. If you remember, her ex-boyfriend and the father of her child threw a fit and tried to publicly shame Keke for showing up at an Usher concert and looking fabulous, right? You a mother though, right? So like that's a classic example of how we're all conditioned into a binary, mutually exclusive thinking under patriarchy. Because patriarchy is all about false binaries that cause us to reject the fullness and complexity of our own humanity and the humanity of others. So if a woman is nurturing, loving, and God forbid a mother, it is a violation for her to also be living and expressing herself in full sensuality. That's Mrs. Robinson territory. And if you're unfamiliar with the movie, spoilers, the mother who has desire, right, the sensual mother, she ends up seducing her daughter's love interest, Dustin Hoffman. It's a really good movie. You should check it out. But just another classic example, women can be either, but never both. And so the Wh-re can never be seen as a nurturing, mothering force either. That's where we get these sayings like, you can't make a hoe a housewife. That's this dichotomy, okay? So we're all socialized into this false moral dichotomy. It's taught to us through religious beliefs, media narratives, and common tropes across storytelling. So just look at some of these common depictions throughout Christian imagery. So this is one of many. We have the pure Madonna, elevated in light and love, nursing her sweet baby Christ. And beneath her, lurking in the shadows of sin and temptation, is Eve, on her back, with her legs spread, beckoning with the serpent, right? This is the Madonna and the Wh-re Complex. And like even Taylor Swift has fallen victim to this conditioning, right? So she received a lot of pushback for her music video for You Belong With Me because it relied on this complex for visual messaging. And like, listen, I love T-Swift. I love T-Swift. This is not a knock, but an acknowledgement of how this conditioning seeped into her creative expression. And since discourse bells rang about it, we have not seen her consciously choose to utilize this trope again, which proves why conversations about this are so important, okay? When we can name it and bring awareness to these concealed patterns that shape us and how we perceive our own selves and each other, then we claim the authority to release it from within and to choose not to continue perpetuating it or to continue feeding it any sort of legitimacy as this is just the way things are. So this complex is much more than abstract social conditioning. On an interpersonal level, men who struggle with this complex experience it as sex without love and love without sex. These men struggle to integrate desire, sexual desire, and loving relationships, viewing them as mutually exclusive. And so obviously this majorly impacts women and femmes as well. So there's a lot to unpack here in this series. And by the way, shout out to KK Love 3045 for this great topic suggestion. Appreciate you, my love. But so in this first video, we're gonna focus on the psychological dynamics of men who struggle with the complex. What's at play from their perspective, like subconsciously. Later in the series, we're gonna take a look at how the internalization of this complex manifests in women and how this social programming is often politically tapped into to mobilize people against feminism, against abortion healthcare, against investments in social infrastructure like community childcare support, maternity leave, universal healthcare, right? This complex is tapped in to deny necessary social investments of reciprocity and care between people. It really does go that deep and broad. Because remember, the Madonna is chaste and desireless, right? The pure ideal woman, chaste and desireless. She seeks nothing for herself and only gives through sacrifice. And that messaging is subconsciously leveraged to justify the rampant refusal to invest in life-supporting policies and to instead frame the need for social investments and the need for men's active participation in care work as a failure of women, as a sign that women have become to the oars by refusing to self-sacrifice while receiving nothing in return. It does go that deep. So let's get into it. And obviously, to avoid foul language violations, I'm saying to the or. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. And I don't know, the algorithm probably does too. All right. So I found this really great Reddit thread through my research that I'm going to be relying on heavily in this video to explore the psychological perspective from men who have sex without love and love without sex. And the full thread is linked below. All right, so here's the thread. How do we as men heal the Madonna to the or complex? Over the years, I've had this weird pattern when it comes to women I've dated/liked. With some of them, I projected this pure image. They were angels, sweet, innocent, motherly, and I felt deeply in love with them. Sex wasn't that important. It was more about living this beautiful dream with them. Other women I saw as bad. I thought they were manipulative, promiscuous, out to hurt me, liars, sexually obsessed, and so on. Sometimes, more often than not, I see both images in the same women, and that creates a sort of attraction-unattraction loop. Not only is this not fair to them, because they are complex people that deserve a more complex understanding, but it also sort of hinders my love life. The women I really want end up as my friends. The women I only want sexually end up as my partners. But when I start to apply the romantic image to them, my sex drive for them becomes lower. I become content with just being with them. And at this point, I don't even know what it is that I want. It's even worse for some of my male friends. They call women to the oars, hire sex workers, and don't want to settle, viewing women as another creature. It only divides the genders, and I don't like it. My wish is to become as realistic in my thinking as possible. One of the things I want to work on for myself and for the women in my life is to heal the Madonna to the or complex. So any ideas? Can you tell me more about this complex? And more importantly, how to heal it? Oof. So that's actually super humanizing, right? To hear a man seeking out advice on how to heal this. Like, I greatly appreciate this poster. They've since deleted their account. And the responder we're gonna focus on, I really appreciate them for having this conversation. They've done us a real mitzvah, all right? And so, as I said, this is posted in a forum about psychiatrist Carl Jung. If you're unfamiliar, Carl Jung was instrumental in developing psychology into a respected science. He was a heavy hitter up there with Freud. But I like Carl Jung's framework a lot better than Freud, so. Which is actually kind of funny because Freud was the first one to identify the Madonna to the or complex. Freud basically said that men were rejecting their own femininity and that they projected that self-disdain onto women. And that this is the root of the complex. And Freud actually originally called the complex psychic impotence, which I think is a better term. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's a better term. So what we're really talking about is the internalization of false patriarchal binaries. The false idea that masculinity and femininity are mutually exclusive. And if you have one, you cannot have the other. It's a flat line and boop, boop, which is absolutely incorrect, okay? And this fundamental lie, this gender binary, is what causes the internal fracturing. we end up hating or repressing natural parts of our own wholeness to try and live up to the false gender binary. And then from that space, we end up hating and rejecting the wholeness of others when they are not fitting into this binary that isn't true, okay? So let's get into some of the responses in this thread. And after I read this main one, I'll circle back to explain a couple of the terms that are used that are very specific to Carl Jung's framework. So don't worry if some of the sentences don't make total sense at first. This was the best response by far. You are projecting a fantasy that revolves around dehumanization. What does that tell me? That you are disgusted with your own humanity and the humanity of others. The more human women become, the less you love them. I think this is a father wound, to be honest, since there's a desire to utilize others. More significantly, it's because men socialize with other men by degrading women. A Jungian view would be that men are collectively being possessed with archetypes that demonize women / see them as inferior. It is a societal thing and a lack of anima integration. Side note. Anima is a man's internal femininity. Animus is a woman's internal masculinity in this framework, okay? So it's a societal thing, and a lack of anima integration means it's a socialized thing and men not integrating their own internal femininity, rejecting it. So just like what Freud was saying. Okay. So this fantasy is rooted in a desire to idealize. And all idealization is done with the unconscious desire to then degrade. It is compulsive. One of the most important elements found in the tendency to idealize is that the idealizer wants to be idealized. This is why degradation is a guarantee, because then the idealizer's goal is realized. The idealizer degrades what they first idealized to be above it. So what does this look like interpersonally? You want to feel like Superman, but you also don't want Lois to have any needs outside of regulating your ego. But if Lois puts you first and herself last, you'll hate her for that too. If Lois fails to make you feel like a god because she is attainable, you experience disgust. That disgust puts you above Lois, making you the god you wanted to feel like when the initial idealization occurred. I'd like to add that you are thereby putting women in a double bind, simply so you don't have to look in the mirror and acknowledge your humanity. You confuse consummation as evidence of their low character. If women having sex with you makes them a huh to the or, then it is you that is the huh to the or, not them. You mistake their attainability as being huh to the ors, and thus no longer valued by you, which speaks to a deeper insecurity. You feel like you have nothing to offer anyone, but need them to take the blame for your lack. That means it's a conquest for you. Women have nothing to gain by being with you. In fact, women have everything to lose by simply being with you because you will degrade them. I'd also like to add that you are most likely projecting that women are out to hurt you onto them, meaning you are out to hurt women, and then you will ultimately blame them for it and assume it's actually their goal towards you. This paranoia reflects that you subconsciously realize that you will devalue women after initially idealizing them, which I covered above. This is abusive. Side note from Coco, that's like preemptive strike logic, right? I have the intention to use you, degrade you. So I'm going to project that that's what you want to do to me so I can justify what I'm doing, my original intent, as a preemptive strike. Didn't work in Iraq and it doesn't work in relationships. So back to the response. Men think that they naturally degrade women, misogyny, but that degradation is a choice that becomes a habit that is feeding your unconscious desire to destroy. Jung would refer to this as the devouring lion. So you devalue women because that doesn't hurt as much as devaluing yourself. Women are seen by you as instruments to be used to help you self-soothe and hide from your own inadequacy. This is called externalization, causing harm to others instead of doing work on yourself. Men are very sick collectively. It goes far beyond a simple mother wound and is a cultural thing. Objectifying women is at the root of an identity centered in toxic masculinity. Healthy masculinity does not feel the need to do this. In order to see women as human beings, you need to develop empathy and not objectify them. But seeing women as people means you also have to see yourself as a person. And you don't want that. Again, the need to idealize others means you want to be idealized. My heart hurts for women. A concerning amount of men have the need to tear women down, leaving women with the idea that they have to shrink themselves so men can feel big. This is called having a sadistic worldview. All objectification is rooted in sadism. Many men have this because of patriarchy and embrace it / feel entitled to harm women, even if it's unconscious, because harming women makes you a god. It does not. I wish men would not engage with women when having these issues. Please heal yourself, go to therapy, do the work, because it causes so much harm to the women in your life. Harm reduction should be the priority. P.S. I suggest you read All About Love by Bell Hooks. Woof, woof, woof. What a response. Like, I was doing a lot of research for a while and like trying to compile stuff, and then I stumbled on this and I was like, oh, he knows what's up. Let's talk about this guy. He really knew what was up, right? Okay, so I want to just quickly go back to one point. He says, a Jungian view would be that men are collectively being possessed with archetypes that demonize women / see them as inferior. It's a social thing and a lack of anima integration. So to Jung, the psyche represented the entirety of the human mind, the conscious and unconscious elements that come together to make us who we are. Jung believed that the psyche was divided into 3 parts: ego, personal unconscious, and collective unconscious. So the ego is the central pillar of the conscious mind, representing awareness of the world around us, personal identity, thoughts, feelings, and conscious memories. The personal unconscious refers to thoughts and memories that a person experienced but does not recall or has repressed. And the collective unconscious is a type of genetic memory that is developed from shared experience and knowledge common to the human species. Jung believed that the collective unconscious was passed down to all humans as a part of the evolutionary process. So this part of the psyche contains the archetypes, universal images of people, behavior, or patterns that humans instinctually recognize. Examples of these archetypes, such as the mother figure, the wise old man, and the hero, can be found throughout history, from ancient myths to modern film and television. And so I think that's really important. I know some people find it to be too woohoo, woo-woo, the collective unconscious, but I think it's legit. I buy into this framework, okay? And I think archetypes is a great way to frame what is happening here. Men are socialized into patriarchy, we all are, and they identify with archetypes that are dysfunctional and harmful to themselves and to women and femmes at large, right? And so within Carl Jung's framework, he didn't specifically have Madonna and the Wh-re in his archetype list, but that doesn't mean they're not at play, okay? Because archetypes are everywhere, right? Like John Wayne is a patriarchal archetype, for real. And so if you think about it, an archetype represents an idealized form, right? We're talking a lot about this. And we connect to these archetypes at a distance. Archetype is never a personal and intimate relationship. They're an idealized form, a representation beyond our direct contact. And so it's similar to me, when we experience parasocial limerence, right? An intense attraction to a celebrity, an intense devotion and connection to a celebrity where you feel like you know them and you really get them. But it's at a distance. You've never met this person, right? It's as a preteen, I loved Freddie Prinze Jr. I loved Freddie Prinze Jr., okay? But really, I was loving the archetype that he was representing in those 90 movies, right? Effortlessly cool, but a bit dorky, but hot and down to earth. And I liked that. I connected with that archetype because I wanted to exude that vibe myself, just like this responder is saying, right? So like ultimately we limit and prune ourselves or expand and grow ourselves relative to the archetypes that we're attracted to and attaching to on like this very deep level. So I really like this response because it recognizes that the patriarchal archetypes that we attach to and seek to emulate are driving a lot of harm. And that goes well beyond like personal experiences like, oh, my mom was mean, or this girl cheated on me, or like whatever. It goes well beyond that because it's about what we're culturally attaching to in like an idealized identity kind of way. And those things like idealization can never match reality, right? You can't build intimacy through idealization no matter what. So patriarchy has taught men to attach to toxic archetypes that use women instead of connecting with women. And at the core, like this responder is saying, it all ends up being a projection of what they're seeking and rejecting in their own selves. And like, that's not just men, like I said, it's for all of humanity. And so this is really the meat and potatoes of healing that must occur for us to release patriarchal dysfunction. And I really appreciate that the responder made it clear that these archetypes and social conditioning are like a root of this problem. It's more than interpersonal. Cool, so I want to talk about another paragraph in detail. Men think they naturally degrade women, misogyny, but that degradation is a choice that becomes a habit that's feeding your unconscious desire to destroy. Jung would refer to this as the devouring lion. That was the archetype Jung would talk about, right? So you devalue women because it doesn't hurt as much as devaluing yourself. Women are seen by you as instruments to be used to help you self-soothe and hide from your own inadequacy. This is called externalization, causing harm to others instead of doing work on yourself. Woo! So externalization. I think this is the number one challenge for healing collectively, like in my opinion, causing harm to women to avoid doing the work on themselves. And I think this is the root of frustration, like for so many women, femmes, and allies are having with trying to have conversations about patriarchy, especially like the male loneliness crisis, or when we're talking about men's crisis in any arena. And like we get really frustrated when people like Scott Galloway come out and complain that men are unfairly unsupported and treated badly for speaking about their problems. Like, check out this clip.
I can't tell you how many times in my comments, Liz, I'll get, well, if men just got their shit together, they wouldn't have these issues. Can you imagine me saying that about a black person or a gay person?
But here's the thing, Scott. A black person or a woman didn't build the system that we're in. Men have built the system that we're in. And now more than ever, we don't even need to name any names. Like you turn on your TV and you look at who's in government and who's in charge and who's deciding things and who put those people in power, and it's men. I think that's at the crux of the frustration of a lot of women when they hear about the loneliness crisis, when they hear about these, the plight of men, which, I'm with you, is something we should be worried about. They get frustrated because they go, but you have power. We don't have the power that you have. So change the system. You actually have more influence than us in being able to change the very system that's hurting you. And by the way, we've been telling you all this time that this system is hurting us, and you haven't necessarily been paying attention until it's, doing having an effect on you, and I think your point about if you're a woman, there's no threat to going on a date with a man. Like 1 in 10 women have their drink spiked. 11 million women are going to be raped while they're being drunk. Every woman knows a woman who's that has happened to. And even beyond that, Scott, like, sure, like maybe I won't get killed on a date with a guy, but will I feel good after that date? Will I that exposure to men for women is not always a plus, but exposure to women for men is a plus. And if you think about that even as a microcosm in our society, like marriage, right? Marriage is very, very heterosexual, men who marry women. have a lot of benefits from marriage, right? They're having a woman in their lives is very positive for them, but the opposite is not always true. It obviously, I'm not saying it's always bad, but the benefits, to having a female presence in your life if you're a man is usually on the, just a total positive. And for women, it can be the worst part of your life in many ways.
Whew, I love her. She handled that perfectly. I think I might have had steam coming out of my ears and just been like, meh, 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 which is not necessarily the most productive approach to conversations. But man, Scott Galloway really drives me bananas. But this is the dominant problem, right? Is that it's all this externalization, and the subtext of all of Scott Galloway's stuff is, well, if women don't lower their standards and just continue to participate in the Madonna and the Wh-re Complex and like these dysfunctional expectations and relationships with men, they're just gonna have to be violent. There's nothing men can do. There's nothing they can do. And that's like all externalization. And it's a problem because women, femmes, and allies, we're exhausted by compassion. We're exhausted from extending empathy that gets consumed without return. And that exhaustion turns us away from men. And we end up saying, figure it out on your own then. We can't do this work for you. We cannot support you enough or love you enough to do the internal work that is necessary because your goal is to avoid doing the work all through externalization and deflection. And like, nobody else can solve this problem. We collectively can do a lot to dismantle patriarchal dysfunction, but we cannot do it if men do not join us and actually start on the interior work on themselves. Like no one else can do that for them or make them feel safe enough to begin that work. It's just, you can't. No one can help another person stop rejecting their own humanity. No one can do that work for another person. I can't do that for a man. I can't do that for a woman. I can't do that for a they. I can't, and no one could do that for me, right? And like, that's kind of the harsh part about being an individual existence. We're all tied together. We have to solve these problems together, and we have to do the internal work ourselves. I didn't make the rule book, okay? That is all above my pay grade. I am just explaining that this is how it goes. So let's go back and look at this part again. You want to feel like Superman, but you also don't want Lois to have needs outside of regulating your ego. But if Lois puts you first and herself last, you'll hate her for that too. If Lois fails to make you feel like a god because she's attainable, you experience disgust. That disgust puts you above Lois, making you the god you wanted to feel like when the initial idealization occurred. I'd like to add that you are thereby putting women in a double bind simply so that you do not have to look in the mirror or acknowledge your own humanity. Excuse me. Oof. That whole part, I was like, pick me city, pick me city. This is the exact struggle of pick me's, okay? 100% Pearl coded. So if you're unfamiliar, Pearl is a YouTuber. She has like over 2 million subscribers. And she rallies against feminism and says crazy stuff all the time. Like, of course it's natural for men to cheat in relationships. They can't control themselves. But if a woman's unfaithful, she has betrayed and destroyed her relationship and deserves nothing. And so, Pearl comes out and she rallies against career women while having a very public and lucrative career herself, saying, women need to go to wife school, not college. And we must submit. It is the natural order. And blah, 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 blah. So she's just always carrying water and spewing out red pill talking points, left, right, and center.
Hey, I'm really not like these other girls.
Yeah, I heard that.
I don't do this much. I'm not that type of girl.
But she has been single for years and years and years. And apparently she recently got married. Congratulations, Pearl. Your life purpose has been realized. Apparently her husband, though, posted some tweets about having to settle on looks. And, I'm not even going into the swill of Twitter to try and find that thread for you. I just saw other people talking about it enough that I'm like, oh, that's probably true. I don't do Twitter. But like, here's a clip from a popular TikTok basically explaining why red pill men didn't want Pearl.
Do you know why Pearl is available? Because even though she says the right things that men resonate with, she's masculine. Feminine women do not go online and sit on podcasts and argue with men all day long. Why not pick her? Because we couldn't marry someone that's like that and argumentative and fighting.
Imagine being the biggest female voice of the red pill movement. You say things like women shouldn't be allowed to divorce their husbands, that men should demand a DNA test at the delivery of their children. You say things like women shouldn't be allowed to vote. You say things like you shouldn't believe all assault victims. You do everything that you can to throw women under the bus for the sake of looking good in front of men, and those men go online and say stuff like this. My theory on why pick-me women rarely get picked is because they don't present themselves to be much of a challenge. A man likes to feel like he's changing a woman's mind, like he's talked her into something. And if the woman's already coming in saying, I'm submissive to you, you're better than me and all that, it's not as much fun. They'd rather take a woman who is independent and try to make that woman submissive. They'd rather take a woman who is clearly materialistic and make that woman split bills with them. But they need somebody like her so they can be able to say, no, it's not just us. Look at this woman right here. She agrees with us. I heard somebody say once that men want a woman they can subjugate, but Pearl subjugates herself. And that's the truest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and so this is exactly the dynamic of the Madonna and the Wh-re Complex, right? And side note, I love this creator that gave commentary. This was a repost of her thing, and I follow her, but I go through my whole thing and I can't find her. And on TikTok, I've been like randomly unfollowed a bunch of feminist creators that I usually follow. It's like really weird. And I can't find her proper handle. If anyone recognizes her, please comment in the... I really love her work, and I didn't realize that I hadn't seen her on my FYP in a minute. And then I go and look this up and I'm like, I know you. And then it's so annoying that trying to find the original video, I can only find repost videos. Like, the algorithm, man. But please, she's an incredible creator. I really like her stuff. If you recognize her, please help tag her so I can, one, get back to following her, but two, give credit where it's due. But anyway, this is the degradation cycle that we're talking about. Once a woman is attained, or even like rides for the beliefs that they say that they want, once a woman is even converted to the values that they say, this is what I want as a man, they're disgusted with her. Disgusted, right? And so like that's the core dysfunction of red pill ideology. It is so misogynistic that I only want a woman that does this, this, and this. And then if a woman's like, oh, I would actually be down with that, they're like, ew, disgusting. It's like this red pill movement. They openly treat women who agree with their values with disgust. And it's this cycle that is harming men, that's harming women, that's harming femmes, theys, and gays. It is this cycle that is so destructive. And like women, femmes, and the theys, we can really only educate ourselves, build ourselves up, do the healing work on our side of the street, and, engage when there is good faith engagement from men. But otherwise, we can't fix this on their side. There is a limited, we can't like reach in like it's operation and be like, oh, let me get the little bone out for you. Like we can't do that kind of work for others. We can try and inspire them, we can try and educate them, but it's frustrating. And like, if you try to understand their values too much, it's kind of like the best way to lose everything to gain nothing, a la Pearl. And like, straight up, I feel bad for Pearl. I really do. It's probably condescending that I feel bad for her, but I don't care. It's my position. And like, she came from money, like a generational wealth background too. She obviously is very successful with her following. I hate the damage that she's done to a lot of young women, but now she got what she wanted. She found a man who openly says in public that he had to settle on looks to be with her. And now this is it for her. To serve a man who is fundamentally disgusted by his own attainment of her. Disgusted by the woman who lives by the values that he preaches. Like, this is the core of the Madonna and the Wh-re Complex. And, So I'm going to wrap this video here. There was like a lot to digest and unpack. In our next part, we're going to unpack some of even more of the responses in this thread before we move on to other topics related to the complex. I just want to give us time to breathe with a lot of it's kind of dense, right? Talking about the psychological underpinnings, it's kind of dense. But thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe for weekly videos. I was on a brief hiatus this month. I was moving and I had to earn some more cheddar to keep this channel going, but we're back in full swing, baby. Back to regular scheduled programming of dismantling patriarchy from within us first. We can do it together. But please let me know in the comments, how has this complex manifested in your life experiences? How have you witnessed this pattern play out? And have you ever seen a situation where a woman conformed to the stated desires of a man or red pill vibe and that she didn't end up just degraded and devalued for it? Have you ever seen that actually play out? Because I have not. But thank you so much. I'm over on TikTok at Coco Has Ideas, Instagram, Paraculture Coco. I've got free writings up on Substack, paraculturecoco.substack.com, and we got a lot to unpack, so stick around. And seriously, drop a line in the comment. I would actually really like to know what your experiences are with this complex. And if there's any part of the response that you feel like I didn't give enough attention to and that you'd like to talk out a little bit more, please let me know. We'll absolutely do that. So love you all, and I'll see you all very soon.